Down.
Can you hobble? Hobble one foot.
You okay there?
1 foot.
Не понимаю.
Let him hobble on one foot.
Один.
Let him hobble on
No,
one
he
foot.
cannot.
Okay, then just lift him up.
Hold on.
G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day. Now today's podcast, this is a really good one with my friend Gibby, who served in Ukraine and will continue to serve further on as well. He talks about his unique experiences in Ukraine, fighting for different units and also in the right sector, and some unique experiences and perspectives he has had being a black man, serving then in the military there, and a former US Marine. So thank you, mate, so much for coming on and sharing so openly your stories, your experience with myself as well. And also, who'd like to give a tribute to Kilo, his friend who sadly lost his life in this war. Hey, mate, how are you?
I'm doing well. And yourself?
I'm really well, man. Thanks for sitting down with me and having a chat.
No problem.
Man,
Thank you for inviting me on.
oh, mate, no, I really appreciate your time. Look, I don't even know where we're going to start, but can we go back to, I guess, when you first, got into the military and what your experience is there?
Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm no high speed, low drag guy from like teams or anything crazy like that. I was an EMT before I got into the military, so I kind of already had like a little bit of a structure. And then I figured I was going to be like, I wanted to be this high speed, low drag dude. So I was like, I got to go to the toughest branch first, and then from there go into like other stuff. So my recruiter convinced me to go into the Marine Corps, literally just by asking me, hey, do you want to be a seaman? You want to be referred to as a seaman, or you want to be the best of the best? So, my fucking 18-year-old child brain was like, yeah, Marines all the way. So I got in about 2014. 2014, August, October, sometime then. And I stayed in 4 years mostly. I started in UAS operations and then went to bulk fuel specialist. Spent most of my time in the military in Okinawa, Japan with a 9th Engineer Support Battalion, and just grinded, man. It was kind of like the best of all worlds being in the Marine Corps, because you're in an engineer battalion, you're constantly shooting weapons, you're constantly going on ops. And then even though I wasn't a combat engineer, I still got to, play with all the cool toys and qual on a bunch of weapons that like I had no business using, or probably would have never used as a fielder.
Yeah, man, that's wild. And did you deploy like operationally?
I did not. Being in Okinawa, you're forward deployed, so you don't get any like cool campaign ribbons for going to Korea, Australia. So you just kind of get bounced around the island a bunch and like training in the island. And then when all the grunts come over from the States, they all get this cool Japan deployment ribbon.
Yeah, right. Typical infantry shit, hey? And when did you leave?
So I did my 4 years and got out. So I left the military about like 2019, 2018.
Yeah, and what?
And
yeah. Oh, sorry, you go.
Oh no, go ahead, man.
I was just going to say, what were you doing between like then and then the start of the Ukrainian conflict?
Building and shooting guns mostly. I did I bounced kind of like place to place. I couldn't really find like what I wanted to be at home. One of those dudes who's like master of all trades, or jack of all trades, master of none. So I started off doing nothing and then just shooting all day. And my buddies were like, you need to get a job. So I went and became a insurance claim specialist for Blue Cross and Blue Shield for a little bit. Nice. And from there went to working construction with a couple of my buddies to a smaller went from a large construction company, Balfour Beatty, to a smaller construction company in the like local area. And I just realized I hated doing all of that. So my buddy called me up and was like, hey, you know how to shoot shit. You know how to train people to shoot shit. Comes teaches Ukrainians how to shoot shit. Yeah.
Fuck, man.
I'm sorry, I don't know if you want me to jump that far ahead, but yeah, that's pretty much what I was doing.
That's wild, man. And what did you think when the war first kicked off, like on the 24th of Feb? What did you sort of think about it then?
So funny enough, I was in the airport headed to Las Vegas to go see an ex-girlfriend when the war kicked off.
Oh shit!
Like when the first, yeah, when like when all the first news came in, I was like, damn, like Russia's at it again. You know, it isn't the first time they've invaded Ukraine. They did it during the Obama era, and they did it before Ukraine was truly established as Ukraine under peacekeeping. And microaggressions over like the last couple of years. And I remember reading something about the Azov battalion in like a couple of years ago and how they were holding Russia like at the border and having sniper battles and artillery battles and stuff every so often.
Yeah. I think you might have had the most dangerous mission on that day, mate. I think some of the Russian troops had a safer mission than fucking you going to Vegas with an ex.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, to say the least. Like I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I mean, I knew the U.S. wasn't going to truly get involved because they hadn't been getting involved for a while, especially with all of the drama and stuff we had going on with our military. Yeah. I just looked at it and I was like, man, I hope Ukraine succeeds. I didn't really have very much faith in them at the time.
Yeah. So when was it that your mate, called you up and was like, "Hey, let's fucking go"?
Shoot, this would probably be like the end of March. Like, yeah, I think it was March 28th, March 29th. He was like, "Hey, man, I'm going to Ukraine. I've got this unit that wants a bunch of foreigners to come in and train their guys. Like they're going to get a special forces contract. They're not high speed, low drag at all. They're going to get fucked. These dudes can't shoot." So I was like, yeah, man, I have no problem coming in and like on a contractual basis, like just training these guys, maybe, sneak off to the front lines and see what's going on there and what we could do better and what we could be training them better. But I was like, I wasn't really interested in getting it all involved in the actual conflict. So he called me out here. I showed up. It was literally just me. Like him and another buddy of mine had been here for at that point they hadn't been here for a couple of months, but when I got here they'd been here for a couple of months. So I ended up dropping in maybe like June, July-ish.
Yeah, nice.
I will say it is the most awkward thing in the entire world to navigate around Ukraine as a black guy, except in Kyiv. I'm like talking, like I've experienced overseas, so like getting place to place isn't really the hardest thing in the world. I mean, everybody has Google Translate app on their phone, so it's not super hard to communicate. Like every now and then, if you're trying to like say something military with the app, it's a little. But getting around was easy once I got to Kyiv, and then as soon as I got outside of Kyiv, everyone was like, oh, "Black Amerikansky."
And how was that? Was it just out of like, oh, like, we haven't seen someone, or, we don't often see someone with different skin color, or was it like a racial, like, was it just someone learning like, oh, wow, he's different to actually racism? Was there any like of that?
Yeah. No, I'm not one of those like BLM kind of guys. So like I find it like hilarious because like I said, I lived overseas in Japan for almost like 3-4 years. So I'm used to like there being a couple of other black people. I didn't realize how much of a gap there was in Ukraine between like the amount of not just black people but foreigners in general.
Yeah.
And pretty much the entire like outside of like Kyiv, Lviv, and Odessa, like if you see a black person like in a small town, they're just like, I can't believe this. Like, what are you doing here? Like, are you here to help us fight in the war? Like, you're gonna blend in so well at night.
Fuck. And did you ever come across like any like legitimate like racism towards you?
Ooh, see that's actually a hard one. I don't really think in terms of like, oh, this person doesn't like me because of my race.
Yeah.
So it's this person doesn't like me because I'm a foreigner.
Mm.
Is generally what I've come across. Some Ukrainians, whether they're in the war and outside the war, like whether you're on the battlefield or not, just don't like foreigners, and they think that the foreign involvement here is part of the reason that they're suffering the way that they are. And other ones will like drop down to their knees, like thanking you, being like, thank you for coming here and helping us. Thank you for giving us the knowledge that you have and the training that you have, or applying your skills where they can be applied on the battlefield. Just depends on where you're at, what unit. I mean, you know how it is. The Azov battalion would never take a black foreigner. So foreigners are hard enough to get in by themselves. Like, I will say haven't had experience. I'm sorry, I've experienced racism from foreigners more than I have from Ukrainians
Right. And
who are here.
and is
There are
that more
some
like right sector sort of guys?
Yeah, I mean, any country that has like not like Soviet, or I won't even call it Soviet, but Nazi symbology like ingrained in their culture, whether it's correctly ingrained or incorrectly ingrained, um, it'll draw the types of people who live for that stuff. They're like, oh, like I was a part of this Nazi battalion, which ironically the first the first group I trained out here is called the Right Sector, and they're not Nazis in the way that people think of like typical Nazis, but they want Ukraine to be a national socialist country. They don't want foreign involvement or foreign politics. They were definitely grateful for the training. They had someone come out and like politically be like, "Hey, I know he is a black man, and he is training you guys, but he is just as much Ukrainian as the rest of us. Because if he's willing to fight, die, and bleed in Ukraine, then that's a Ukrainian to me." And like all the guys are like sitting around the fire going, "Yeah, yeah, you know what? I didn't think about it like that." You are no longer Black Amerikansky, you are Black Ukrainian Konsky. And I'm like, I was like, I don't know about all that, guys.
Yeah, that's pretty wild, man. Like I can obviously, you're an army guy, like, or military guy. I shouldn't say army or marine. But but I guess you've got fairly thick skin, as all bloody military men need to. So you may not pick up on it as much, but yeah, it is interesting that you say things like that Azov battalion would definitely not take like a black foreigner. Did you ever have a run in with them? Like, did you ever come across them out in the wild somewhere?
Yeah, in the very beginning, not so much now. Azov, I don't know how much you know about Azov, but they've been a lot different of a group. And after Zelensky had told them to stand down in the factory district that was under attack.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely changed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the same leadership structure, and they definitely don't. They're a lot more secretive now than they were before. So even if someone is in the Azov battalion, they may not tell you that they're in the Azov battalion.
Right.
Or in an Azov battalion.
Yeah. And you mentioned there's a you to quote yourself, you said like ingrained Nazi symbology. How much of that did you see, and what was your thoughts towards it? Was your thought that it's just something else, or was it a bit of a shock? Or what do you see towards that, and how common was it?
So it's crazy that you mentioned this, because hopefully my parents never hear this, but they pretty much know how I feel anyway. I'm one of those people where I don't care what the other person does. Like if you want to, if my gay neighbors have a weed farm and want to shoot full auto guns in their backyard, they can. Like, but I'm the same way when it comes to people who have religious beliefs or ideological beliefs that they're better, or they're stronger, faster. Like there's just as much. sorry, I got to think about how I want to say this, but yeah, it doesn't bother me. I've come across people who had like Nazi symbology tattooed on them or on their gear, and I'm like, you're entitled to feel how you feel. Like I could care less. You want to learn what I can teach you or not? Like, there's a very famous guy out here who I ran into who on the phone. I sound very much like a white person. It's part of Catholic school upbringing, I guess. So what's up? This person was talking to me on the phone. Like, he was like, I just want you to know, like, I'm the resident Nazi of the group. Um, yeah, like, you're not going to change how I feel. And he's thinking like he's talking to another white person. And then he met me in person like about a month or so later. He was doing paperwork for another unit he was joining. And I like turned to him and I'm like, do you recognize my voice? And he's like, nah. And our unit had two black guys, which is super rare. And he's like, oh, you're the black guy in the unit, right? And he's like, and named the other black guy. And I was like, no, you haven't met me yet. I was like, I'm the guy you were talking to on the phone. I was like explaining that you were a Nazi. I was like, you can feel whatever you feel, man. I was like, just as long as you can operate in the field, I give a fuck less what you believe. Like, just don't shoot me in the back. Because I was like, I make sure that everybody else on the team knows if I get shot by someone on my own team, like, shoot that person.
Fucking
Sorry, I know that was very long-winded. But based to say that, or what I wanted to do was basically just, it's whatever you believe, man. Like, I'm not here to change your beliefs. I'm here to tell you how to fight correctly so that you don't die.
Yeah. Oh, mate. And as an instructor, I guess that's your job. Your job isn't to try and, you're not there as try to instill your own ideology. You're there to train.
Yeah. And a lot of people out here, like, especially when they haven't experienced like any actual black culture, like, not every black person's a gangster. Not every black person is like is a Chicago black guy or typical Chicago black guy. I'd say some of like a majority of people are just normal people. We get roped up in this thing that people say is black culture, or some like people who follow Nazi beliefs aren't horrible people. They just got roped up into what these other people believe in their Nazi beliefs. And so you got to give some to get some. I've had some people be like, I didn't like black people before I met you. And, I didn't realize that I just didn't know enough black people to be like, oh, you're a cool dude.
Hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting, but I think there is a difference between just being oh yeah, like, I'm a black guy, I can't help that, I just am, I'm just a regular person, as we should treat everyone, no matter their skin color or religious, whatever. But when it's a ideology that is, I guess, as serious as that and has real implication, especially like you're a former Marine, of what the Marines fought against, that specifically, it I guess there's a bit more of a clash there than some other things.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've only ever had a conversation once with a Ukrainian about it. Like a serious conversation where it was like I had to pull one of the guys aside and I was like, hey, listen, like, while we're training on the range, like, I don't care about like general patches, but I was like, you got a giant swastika painted on the back of your helmet. I was like, I just want you to explain to me like why you thought that was a good style choice. Like, what made you think of putting the giant swastika there? And he turned to me and he was like, I'm myself. He was like, I like this. Who? He was like, this isn't my belief. He was like, this was my brother's helmet, and my brother was a part of the Azov battalion that died. And then I was like, I kind of felt a little bit like, oh shit, like now I got to tell this kid that like a helmet that his brother painted a swastika on, he can't wear into combat. And luckily, my translator was kind of quick on his feet, and he was like, just while you're in the range, like, do you mind covering it? And he was like, absolutely. He was like, I didn't even think twice about it. He was like, because no one else here would have said anything to me. But I mean, when the group that you're training says Slava Miats every morning, like, I guess you should kind of expect at least one swastika or SS symbol.
Right. So the group would say Slava Nazi, so like glory to the Nazi every morning.
Yeah.
Fuck, man. I don't know how I'd deal with that, because I'd be like, fuck, like, is the enemy, my enemy, my friend? Like, how far does that go? Like, it wasn't that long ago in Europe and the Nazis were committing crimes against humanity of ungodly scale, and now it's, it's very interesting.
But I guess the way that I look at it is there's a war going on, right? If we did what we do in America and we vet everybody for their individual beliefs, we would be here all day to find 10 people who would be willing to fight. There's people who I know in war who are fighting the war because they want Ukraine to be free, but think Zelensky is just as corrupt as the last person, or that Zelensky did nothing to fix the corruption here. There's people who I know who think that Zelensky is God. One of my buddies out here, one of the best guys I know, is the one person from Ukraine who's actually met my father and my family. He was like that sometimes you have to separate politics and profession. He was like, I can teach you to shoot, move, and communicate all day, but if I choose not to teach you to shoot, move, and communicate because of what you believe in here, then we're going to be stuck here, like, with 5 people who have the same exact beliefs as me. And for a small team, that's perfectly fine. But for a large scale, like, warfare, like it's happening right now, you don't know what the guy who you hop into the trench next to you believes. I mean, he could be gay and smoke weed, and you're just gonna have to accept the fact that you're gonna have to rely on that person, whether you're doing it for 5 minutes or 15 years. Yeah,
no, I completely understand that. And what was I going to ask? I had a good question lined up, and then my brain absolutely went to absolute fucking mush. What I was going to say, sorry, was a lot of guys tell me, like, they're like, oh, I've never come into contact with anything. I've never seen any right-wing stuff, nothing in Ukraine, who have been fighting there and stuff. Do you think that's just sort of glossing over some things?
You'll see it if you're looking for it, or if they want you to see it. Right. is what I'll say for that. Sorry, I hate being so long-winded on these questions, man. Damn, I was about to go something pretty good with that one too. So I was going to say the funniest part of that whole story, which is we ended up getting fired from that unit as instructors. The only way they could keep us with the unit and still, like, push forward was for us to take on, like, military contracts with them.
Right.
And they were going to get paid extra for their unit. I think most foreigners who are fighting here know this, but they get paid extra, like, depending on what foreigners they have. They can also, like, lobby for, based on what our qualifications are, for different types of equipment. So they, there were like 12 of us who were instructing, and they decided that out of the 12 of us, they only wanted 3 of us, our translator, one of the British guys we were working with, and me. And someone was like, I don't think these Nazis are very good at their job, because they chose the black guy to stay.
Yeah.
But it was, it is what it is. I'm not too worried about it. Like, I don't go into a hissy fit. If you can shoot, move, and communicate at the end of the day, man, that's all I care about.
Yeah, no, I get that. And there's been people speculate before that, with these, like, far nationalist groups, could there be problems whenever the war ends and Ukraine wants to, like, sort of westernize, move towards NATO and the EU, and that model, I guess, could there be pushback there from internally of, like, no, we want to be, we're nationals, we want to be under our own entity, rather than, I guess, these EU, NATO stuff that the rest of Europe, well, not the rest, but sort of the EU has almost like a bit more of a left stance than some of that very far, like, right sector.
Yeah, absolutely. There's absolutely going to be. that's the beauty of of a war is you create like hard times are already created. You're gonna have like hard dudes after the war who don't agree with the government, who may not get the pensions that they wanted or the health care that they wanted. They will rise up and form their own groups. Now, depending on how the current government or the government that's in place at the end of the war decides to handle that, that could set NATO like 15 years more before they that could set them back like 15, 20 years to being able to join NATO. It's a political game at the end of a war to figure out like what group is truly going to be in charge, and it's based off of who's left alive and who's left alive strongest. I mean, you got to remember they've armed these guys now. That's that was a choice the government made. It's really easy to give people weapons. It's really hard to take them away.
Yeah, I know. I've speculated on this exactly before, that these battalions this was one thing before this war. Of these like far right sector, with AKs and some older weapons and stuff, and now you're going to have groups like this with absolutely modern weapons, modern training, modern anti-armor systems. That it could be a real struggle for power. Like if Russia would pull back now, where the country goes, well, you've got all these units that have risen up that, well, they might have a different idea of where it actually goes.
Yeah, I've been running into a bunch of people who've been like, this war could be over in a week. And I'm like, no, my guy. Even if Russia decided like they were going to pull back right now, there's still going to be these like, even now the military on the front line is so fractured. It's one military group controls this place, one military group controls that place, and yeah, we all may be wearing the same uniform, but that doesn't mean that every single one of those commanders is fighting the same on the front line or has the same ideologies on the front line. They could be told by the government, don't chase the Russians back into Russia. That's not going to stop half of these groups from doing that if that's what their commander decides to do. If they're loyal to their commanders on the front line, they're not loyal to the Ukrainian government.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And have you come across like any, I guess, more like on the pro-Russian side, or like any like Russian spies within the ranks?
So that is my biggest fear, to be completely honest with you. It sounds like a ridiculous fear to have, like in the middle of a war, but like I said, I'm black, so wherever I go on the front line, even in the rear, I stand out. Which is why a lot of teams were saying that they didn't want to work with me. They were like, just going to go eat someplace with you, like someone snaps a picture and the place gets blown up the next day. Be prepared to accept blame for that. And I understand where some of them are coming from. So we do try and like do things to like mitigate how much of a presence I have in certain areas. But yeah, as it pertains to the question, I didn't run across somebody who was not a crazy person who was pro-Russian, but I have had people say like, "Hey, that person who was over there who's going to try and talk to you, don't talk to him. He's not for he's not for Ukraine. He's Russian. He's a crazy person." And we just do our best to either leave the area or mitigate it. I did have a Frenchman tell me not to wear the Ukrainian flag though.
Oh,
so yeah, he was super pissed. He was like, why do you wear Ukrainian flag? And we're like, because we're here fighting for Ukraine. Like, why wouldn't we? It's like it's the same reason I've got the American flag on my jacket too. Like I'm willing to fight for America if the day ever comes to it.
Yeah, fucking Frenchman, mate. He'd have a white flag on his chest, wouldn't he?
Yeah. Interesting.
That's wild, mate. Yeah. Oh, it is a very interesting, and this is why I really appreciate like your time. Like it's a very interesting like dynamic coming, because like if I go there, I'm just a blue-eyed white dude. Like people have a completely different experience in the world, and especially somewhere like this. So I'm glad you're very open and honest about it, man. Cheers for that.
I mean, it's something that you have to come to grips with. I can either spend my whole life hating the world for something that I can't change, or being hated by the world for something I can't change, or I can just accept it what it is and know that like if three or four of my white friends show up to a unit, like they're not going to have the same issues in the unit that I'm going to have. They're not going to have the same fears in the unit that I'm going to have. And sometimes that works out for me because I end up being the vigilant person, the one who's like, "Hey, let's plan to do this way because that way it'll mitigate how often we spend in an area or how many of us are going to an area to do something."
Right.
And other times it'll be the like my friends will be like, "Oh, I'll just come to the strip club," and then I'll have the one of the Gore commanders call me and be like, "You were at the strip club last night, Doc." Like, and he was like, "No, no, 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 no. I know you were at strip club last night." I was like, "Sorry," and he's like, "There's a picture of you in strip club. Very nice stripper next to you. Be careful in strip club." And then he's up, and I'm like, I don't know how to respond to that. I guess we're not going to the strip club again, boys.
Yeah. Oh, fucking hell. Yeah. It is. Yeah. It's a wild, like, it's a wild perspective on it all, man. Well, not perspective, like, there's wild, like, how you've seen it through your eyes, and, like, yeah, it's very different to the usual experience.
Yeah.
And so to digress a little bit, what then happened? You know, you got selected to continue training with that group, and then you joined the International Legion and picked up in the GUR. What then happened from there with like you going to the front lines, you fighting, and onwards?
So I won't say it was a rash decision to run to the Legion. We realized that so there was a conversation that was had after we had decided that we were going to stay, and they essentially wanted to. They were like, "Hey, we've got some good guys who are like who know what they're doing, and they're coming back." And they were like, "You can join their team, but like you're going to be the lowest person on the team." And I was like, "Okay, like I don't mind." And then they were like, "But you're not gonna like you can't do anything. Like you can't have your apartment that you had in Borispool." They were like, "You can't have what's all like you can't have your own personal vehicle. Like you are basically confined to the base anytime that we're not doing an operation."
Why is that?
They wanted to mitigate how much of my presence was like around.
From who though? Like why mitigate your, like, I know you might stand out because you're a black guy in a primarily white country, but was it out of fear of like someone targeting you or something being targeted, photos? Like what exactly was it?
I think it was more of yeah. I never really thought too much into it, but I think it was more of they were essentially trying to protect me from anybody targeting me or trying to follow my movements to track where the battalion was going.
Right. No, that makes
And
sense.
again, something where I like at the time, I guess like I was a little bit perturbed about it, but I wasn't. I didn't hate them for the decision. I was just like, if I don't have my own autonomy and freedom, then like, and they're like, "Oh, but in the U.S. military, like, you don't have your own autonomy and freedom." And I was like, "No, no, no. You guys don't know that much about the U.S. military. Like, if I want to get drunk on a Wednesday, I just go get drunk on a Wednesday." Not saying that's what I did, but we were all young at one point. But I was like, I like you can have your own vehicle, you could have like you can do what you essentially need to do, and I was like, as long as you show up to work and you show up on time, like no one has a problem. And Borispool isn't too far from Kyiv, so I would have been in an area where I could easily like blend in as a college student if I needed to, and then only pop into the units when we had to actually go work. But they didn't see it the same way, so we ended up parting our ways. And one of my buddies was like, "Let's go to the Legion and go to the front line and do UAS and drone stuff." And since I had some experience in drones from when I was in the military and before I switched over to bulk fuels, I was like, "Yeah, I'm 100% for it. Like, let's go." So we got to the Legion, and they, after testing us, like they had there was only two of us who were going into the Legion that month. So we got the full treatment of like, oh, let's see what you guys can do. Oh, run a plan and run a mini operation to go do recon in this area, the training area. So we showed them what we can do. We showed them what our capabilities were. Me and the other guy I was working with were like, he goes by Judge, but we were like one brain cell. So like we just got to just fit together. Or one brain unit. We just fit together. And so we showed them like we had the capability and understanding to be able to operate with limited oversight on the front lines, and show them like how we would gather intel without having to put our own selves like in direct danger. And they thought it was brilliant. And they ended up attaching us to the 59th Mechanized Infantry, under it was a gore unit, but it had other guys who had come through in the Legion as well. They kind of leaned on the Legion just a little bit because they had lost, like, it was one of the original 50-50 units. If anybody who's listening, or I'm pretty sure you know what that means.
I actually don't. What's the 50-50 unit?
So 50-50 units are kind of like they're a mix between like their special forces and regular people unit. So regular conscripts were coming in on the Ukrainian side as well. So there's generally a 50% casualty rate for most of their missions. Like these are the guys who go in like assault tree lines, but they don't have the personnel or sometimes even the functioning weaponry to do it.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a term that's been like being thrown around in Ukraine. There's a unit that's actually called 50-50, which is their unit sign. And then there were a group of units in the very beginning where it was like, hey, they're sending you to this unit because they have a 50% casualty rate. Like, hope you get your affairs in order before you go there. And between the foreigners, we all knew which units were which, and we talked to each other and figure out what's going on. But we showed up to this unit. There's a lot of guys who are very famous now from that unit who had literally came in with no experience, and then they just figured out like, this is what works, this is how I stay alive, and that's how they were doing it. That's generally how we operated. It wasn't like we had to answer to someone at the end of the day, but we generally didn't have to answer to someone amongst ourselves. It was if two people were willing to leave the OP to go do like some short range reconnaissance on an area or a tree line, then two of us would just look at each other and be like, all right, we're gonna go fucking do this. Like, let's go. But the Ukrainians generally will hit their OP, and then if they can't see it from their OP, they're not worried about it. They're counting like the amount of mortars or the amount of artillery that they hear. They're guesstimating whether there's a tank based on like the impact or what they're firing. They're guessing whether their tubes are good. We actually went on a mission where they said like, oh yeah, like they haven't been resupplied in a month. Like they're going to be out of mortars by tomorrow. And I'm like, dude, these guys are getting impacts within 6 inches of like what they're trying to hit, which was like our foxholes we had dug into the side of the OP. I'm like, these are brand new mortar tubes, bro. You don't get this accurate consistently. I'm talking about like, I looked to the left, there was an explosion. I looked to the right, there was an explosion. And if I had been laying like straight across, it would have hit between where my head and my feet were. Jesus. I literally, actually, I even forgot about this. There's a German kid out here who is a paramedic. And he and my squad leader, Finn, great guy. If you ever get a chance to talk to Bryce again, ask him about him. Dude's nuts. Will accept just about any mission you throw at him, and genuinely, like, doesn't seem like he has a plan, but has something going. And it's just, if you stick with him, you stay alive. And it's generally people who branch off from him who get killed very quickly. Might just be the luckiest Finn I've ever met. So we're sitting in this foxhole, we're getting fucking just bombarded, fucking mortars, artillery, and he goes, fucking A, the dock's not in a fucking hole. And I'm like, tell him to get in the hole. And he was like, he's not going to hear me. I got to run over to him and let him know. Hops out of the fucking hole. Like, we're still getting mortared, our hole specifically. Runs over to the dock and goes, get in the fucking hole. So the dock runs to the hole he just came out of and jumps in the hole backwards. So it's like we're knees to knee at this point. Like he's not fully in the hole. Because like unless you're sitting in the person's lap, like you're not in the hole. So I'm watching the mortars hit behind him, like maybe like 3-4 feet off from this hole.
Jesus.
And I'm just like, I don't know how we're not getting smacked with shrapnel right now. Like it was kind of like soft dirt on the side of this mountain. So it's like they're leaving craters, they're kicking up dirt, but for whatever lucky reason, we're just not taking shrapnel at that moment. So one lands like, I'm talking about like at this dude's ass crack. And like just skips backwards and just doesn't go off. And I donkey kicked this kid out of the hole, and I'm like, move to a different hole. And we just start hauling ass and hopping, like I baseball slide into this hole that's got like 3 Ukrainians laying on top of each other in it. Definitely nailed one in the back of the Kevlar. And I'm just like laying in their hole with them. There's like now 5 of us in this hole, and I'm just like, sorry, boys, it was getting a little sketchy over there. We go back to the hole, and the next mortar, I don't know if it was the next one or the one after it, but Finn was like, he runs over and he's like, Gibby. And I'm like, what's up, bro? And he was like, oh, you weren't in the hole anymore? And I was like, nah, we moved. And he was like, a mortar landed in the hole, bro. And we go inside, and sure enough, there's like a 6-inch piece of metal sticking out of one of my bags that were just outside the hole. And I'm just like, damn. I probably would have been fine, but our medic wouldn't have been fine. Good times, great people. Sorry, man. I didn't mean to go on a super wild tangent.
Mate, no. Don't, not at all. Trust me. I'm the fucking king of going out on tangents, man. Like any tangent is great. Just, never feel like you're talking too much shit, man. I appreciate it. The stories and shit like that are awesome, man. Like, bits and pieces like that need to be told and like remembered, man, because it's just crazy in modern warfare for things like this.
Yeah, I will say a lot of people have come over here and been like, oh, like I've got friends who want to come, but they were just a Humvee driver in the military. They're just motor T. They were just heavy equipment. And I'm just like, if you got the skills and capability, like to be able to operate in high stress, like we didn't essentially get to choose all of our jobs in the military. So you may never know if that person who was AG might be the high speed, low drag dude of the unit who might have the ideas and the mentality to get things done. So it's just, as long as you can find a group of guys who are willing to work out here, that's generally what I say. Like, let's fucking do it.
No, man. No, it's very true. It's fucking cool. How much like combat did you actually come across? Were you like in shootouts with the Russians as well?
Yeah, so our unit, we did get in a firefight with the Russians occasionally. It's not the same way that some of these other units did. We were really good at moving around our OPs without being seen, and the area we were moving in, we knew where the groups of enemies were already. So there was a town just outside of Mykolaiv, like that had been captured, and most of the locals had left the town. But there were a few that stood behind, and the Russians had taken over like the buildings in their village and taken over the buildings in a village about a click from them. So we would run into like their just basic patrols. Like these guys weren't even really looking around to see if there was other people. Most of them were probably just moving gear from one place to another, moving personnel from one place to another. I don't know if you ever talked to your fucking nuts Yuri.
Yeah, I did. Yep.
Yeah, but he was a part of the same unit I was in. So what they would do is they would drive in with their Humvees and like drop Madu's fire in like a specific area or specific building, depending on where they thought people were. and then they would pull out. And whatever the next day, like we'd be out there like watching from the OP, and we'd see anybody who was in that building that they were trying to move, and we just start firefights with them. Craziest firefight I ever got into was with a sniper, though. It wasn't really a good day for him. It wasn't really a good day with us for us either. We brought 4 machine guns to specifically take out this like sniper's nest, and we weren't sure if there was one person in this building or like 10 people in this building. And what would end up happening is like we would start taking like really accurate fire, like, and we would essentially be like hiding behind like the edge of this hill, like trying to shoot 450 meters or so to hit this building and hit a very specific window in this building, which with 4 machine gunners is not as easy as you would think, especially when you don't have modern optics or capabilities that like of an M240 Bravo. Like we were using an MG42 PKM, and I think someone had the oh man, I can't remember the name of it. It's like the AK version. It's like the long barrel AK,
like an RPK.
RPK. Yeah. And it was the most accurate thing we had, but when you put like 600 rounds through that thing, it starts to get really hot.
Yeah.
We actually forge welded one of the barrels to the machine gun, totally destroyed that thing. Because I had tried to explain to the rest of the guys that were with us, like, if you don't change out those barrels, like, you're going to fuck those guns. And that's what we ended up doing. We ended up leaving with ammo because none of the machine guns would function. But yeah, so we ended up getting this firefight with a sniper or the sniper nest, and as soon as we thought like we took this dude out and we stopped shooting and we're waiting to like get the good to go to evac, we saw like 8 dudes come out the back of this building. So now we're at like 450 meters, like AKs, like on the side of this hill, trying to hit these dudes in the back of the building. It's crazy.
Jesus. And did you kill anyone?
As for like close, we never had any like super close range firefights. None of our firefights were something that like we weren't prepared for. Like they were controlled essentially. It was like we know these guys like are moving this way, and we would just shoot, hope we hit what we were aiming at. A few of us had brought our own optics, so we were a lot more accurate than what the rest of the guys that were in this unit were doing. But they just mostly had stock AKs, unless they were part of the Humvee teams that were going out with Yuri.
Yeah, right. And yourself, have you killed any of the Russians?
So nothing confirmed. We've had firefights where we went and checked on bodies afterwards. I don't know if I'm specifically killed anyone, but just shoot and move. That's literally like what we were doing.
Yeah, and with the Russians, were they like, how was their capability? Were they decent soldiers? Was their artillery good? Like, what was your take on at least the ones you'd fought?
So the mortar teams they're good. They're a lot better than I thought they would be. Like everyone likes to talk about the Russians like they're stupid and slow, but they're not. Like you have in the beginning, I think there was like a 7-minute window is what they were saying was the time between when the drone would fly over versus when the mortars or artillery would start dropping on you. The group we were going up against, some people say they were Spetsnaz and BDB. We knew they weren't just general conscripts. Like these guys were a lot more organized than what the general Russian conscripts were. These dudes would fly a drone over us, and in less than a minute, they would have like accurate fire on wherever we were at.
Right.
And it was crazy. A lot of recon, you don't want to be seen, or Razvika is what they call it out here. So we've been shot at by armor. So your question was about like us getting into actual firefights and stuff, and we've got into a lot of anti-armor stuff. We didn't really get into like personnel firefights, only when they would ask us to come do to come on their like assault missions when they were taking tree lines and stuff. And after the first one, I was like, this is not what I want to do. Like, this is way too unorganized, and just sending waves of guys through a tree line. It's like, well, I'll let the Ukrainians handle that. There's some foreigners who love it, but that just wasn't my bread and butter. And I was like, I can't see this being like a sustainable way of fighting. So if we didn't have to participate in assault, like as a QRF team or something, I just let the other guys handle assault missions.
Yeah. And with that, with, I guess, the sustainability of fighting, from what you have seen, is Russia taking significantly more casualties than Ukraine, or is it 50-50, or is it Ukraine taking more than Russia? I can't talk.
Ooh. This is a very interesting conversation, and it was going to lead into something that I was going to bring up later. So I'm not a huge interview guy. I know is well spoken and everything. But the main reason I wanted to talk to you and Matt specifically was because there was a former U.S. Army captain out here, Kilo,
Yep.
and I won't give his actual name, but he goes by Kilo, and one of the teams out here is called RTK, Recon Team Kilo, and part of the reason why, like the reason I look at the war the way I do now and the sustainability of the troops is because of what happened to him. If you don't mind, can I go into telling that story, and then I'll answer your question a little bit afterwards? It'll be answered in the story.
Mate, I'd love you to.
Okay. So Kilo, I ended up meeting him like very early in when he first came into Ukraine. Like this is like his third day in Ukraine. I'd already been here for like almost 3 months. So I knew just a little bit more than him because of the group I was training and a little bit more of what was going on. But I ended up meeting him at the Legion, and we kind of just like hit it off like right away. I'm a gun dude. He was a gun dude. So it was like we start talking guns. It's like, I don't care if you're a 7.62 AK guy, or if you're a 5.56 AR guy, or if you're weird like me and you got to build your own like mutant and have a 7.62 AR. Like gun guys just tend to hit it off out here. So like he knew what he was doing when it came to tactics. I just think he was a lot more administrative than he was like combat. He was honest, just like I was. Like, hey, no previous combat experience. Like, I've trained a lot. I'm overqualified, under experienced, and yeah, we ended up in the same unit. They had left to go to the unit a little bit before us, so they kind of gave us a heads up when we got there of like what to expect. Just they'd been at the Legion for I think almost like a week longer than we had. So we ended up in the same unit as them, and we went on a couple missions together. More than a couple. We consistently went on missions together, and over time, like we just kind of developed a bond. Like we were cool. We had two different ways of going about the war. Kilo wanted to fight the war like more of the American style, and I'm more of like, let's just guerrilla warfare this shit. Like, why do we need to go into a tree line and have a firefight in the tree line if we know there's 30 or so Russians in the tree line? Burn the tree line down. If they run out front of the tree line, shoot them. If they run out the back of the tree line, shoot them next week. Like, force them into areas where we know we could win firefights instead of going into areas where we can't win firefights. And there will always be more Russians waiting for us in the good defensive positions than we will have Ukrainians to spare to take out those good defensive positions. And so the night that one of the last nights Kilo and I spoke was there was an assault mission they were going on based off of the recon that we had given them, except the commander of the unit had disregarded all of the reconnaissance information we had given him. So we had told him that when we went to go take out that sniper, we were being fired at from a tree line that we knew they had planned on like taking. And I estimated like from essentially like where we were being shot from and like how far the tree line stretched. I was like, there's got to be at least like 30 plus people on that tree line. There's no way that there's like a small amount of like 10 or 20 people. Like these guys are too organized to have just left this tree line like completely defended by a small group of people. Like that, I think the town was the distraction. They were waiting for us to push that tree line and essentially like ambush us. But the commander had said that the assault was planned well beforehand. That him and the other commanders, which none of these guys are on the front line, so these are a bunch of like old guys sitting in a room with a map and with a couple of pins in it, going, "Oh yeah, you know what? Like we're gonna go through this tree line into this town and then take the town from there." They, sorry, I don't want to sound too emotional, but they decided that they were going to go with their plan and that our intel didn't make a difference to them. So they said whether there's 15 people or 50 people, like they did not give a shit. They were going to go on the assault mission that had been planned for tomorrow. They tried to say that they had armor assets who were going to assist them, but we knew how the armor assets out here work. They'll show up, they'll fire a couple of rounds, and then or fire a couple of shells and then leave. Like they're not going to stick around to assist if anything bigger or badder than they are comes out. And we also knew from taking fire at our OP that there was a tank in the area. We weren't sure if it was a T-72 or a T-90, but we knew it had the capability to move and put rounds like on target. So it wasn't like a POS tank. Like it was doing its job, and the people in it knew what they were doing. But they didn't believe us about the tank. So they decided they were going on this assault. They were only going to bring 60 guys. They had 30 as like their front wave that were going through the actual tree line, and then they had 30 guys who were going to replace them as a QRF. Or once they expected to take the tree line, they were going to have these 30 guys sit in the actual in the areas that they had taken and relieve the other guys. I told them, I'm like, if you guys send 30 guys into this tree line, you're fucked. Like there's no way you guys are making it out. And the commander he didn't want to have any of it. He was like, we asked for a javelin. We had brought 8 javelin batteries, which actually Bryce had brought 8 javelin batteries. That dude, he can find anything in country. It's crazy. But he had brought them javelin batteries and chargers. We showed them that we knew how to operate the javelin. Yuri actually was the one who like caught everybody up in the unit on how to fire the javelin. So we had the capability to take out this tank if they really needed us to. And we were like, we will go to our OP, and if we see the tank coming towards you guys in this tree line, like we will take it out. And this dude lost his mind on us. He was like, this isn't American military. Not everyone gets F-16 or Javelin, Suka Amerikansky, Blet Amerikansky. And we're like, bruh, like, I don't understand what you're mad at us for, like, because we won't participate in your assault. That's like a half-baked plan by people who don't know what it is, like, on the front line right now. I was like, you guys have this intel. I was like, you're showing me shaky drone footage from a week ago. And I know because we used the drone footage you were showing us to figure out where we were going to set up our OP. So I was like, it's like, this isn't like current. And they're like, oh, no, we know what we're doing. Well, I was like the odd man out with so another guy and I were the odd man out. Like we were like, we're not going. Like we were like, not only are they underprepared for what they're gonna hit out there, like these dudes are gonna get fucking smoked. And they don't understand, like, if this tank comes out and starts hitting this tree line, they are fucked. There's nothing they can do and there's nowhere they can go because there's only one way in and one way out of this tree line without getting shot by the Ukrainians. Because the Ukrainians that were waiting like parallel to that tree line, they've fired at us going to our OP before. Like these were some trigger happy dudes. If they saw something that looked like it had a uniform coming out of that tree line, they were going to smoke it and worry about the consequences later. So Kilo and the group of guys all decided that they were going to go, and us being the 2 odd men out, like we were like, we have a plan for this tree line. Just let us burn it down. Like we will go do it ourselves if we need to. And they were just like, no, like, we don't need you to do that. We're going to assault this. The next morning, everybody who said they were going to go with him the night before, bar one person, had an excuse on why they didn't want to go, whether it was my foot hurt or like one person, rest his soul, he died a couple months ago. Not to speak ill of the dead, literally said to me, like, I had a dream last night that God told me to be humble. And, maybe it's time I take some time off.
Yeah, right.
And I'm just like, if you guys thought the plan was shit, you guys could have just backed me when I said the plan was shit. Like,
yeah, no shit.
I'm not gonna call it, like, I'm not gonna call the dude a liar or anything. But I'm saying, like, we all know this is a shit plan, and like, we're still gonna let our guys go on this anyway. Like, you can't stop someone from going to their death if they want to go to their death. But you can sure as hell do your best to convince them that, like, the plan was shaky at best. And like I said, we may not have seen eye to eye. I haven't said this yet, but Kilo and I may not have seen eye to eye all the time. The dude had the biggest set of brass balls I've ever seen in my entire life, and I will commend him on that. Like, there's very few people I've shed tears for, even in my own life. And the entire time, like, I went home after that op, I was just thinking, like, maybe I could have done something different. Maybe I could have said something different to have made him not go and do what he was going to do. But they went on the assault mission, and just as we predicted, they got completely wiped. The first guys that went in there, a few of them were able to make it back out. They had said that the numbers that they had given them were about 14 people in the tree line. The first group of people that they came up on were so underprepared. Like, they knew they had this tree line, like, well guarded and defended. So they were so underprepared when the first group of guys went in that they said that the first group of Russians they came on just surrendered. And the group behind them started firing through their guys to hit our guys moving in, and dealing with a bunch of people who were surrendering while you're still getting shot at. Like, there's no way to be dynamic while that's happening. So they were literally, our guys were telling us they were throwing grenades in front of them, waiting till their grenades exploded, and then just moving forward or moving backwards. And depending on the person to the left or right of them, whether they move forward or backwards. So about 5 people or so made it out of the tree line, like, walking wounded, and they sent the next 30 in to back those guys up. And it wasn't to back up a retreat. It was because they still felt like they could hold that position. The armor had showed up. They fired a few rounds at the tree line before they pulled in with the Humvee, which was like a giant good morning to every single person who could possibly be in there who was going to fight. So they got an early wake-up call because of the armor. Yuri's group, Yuri wasn't there at this moment, but Yuri's group, the Apache group is what they called themselves, had pulled in, dropped some Madu's fire, and then everybody dismounted and, like, kind of ran into the tree lines. And they were stuck. Like, the only way for them to get out of this tree line was open field to the left or open field to the right. And we just, hearing about it afterwards, like, I kind of wish I had gone. Like, maybe I could have thought fast on my feet and, like, figured out something to, like, help everybody out, or had just done what my plan was anyway and burned the tree line, just and be like, oh no, the plan's fucked, we can't run through fire, and backed out. But I also didn't want to end up in Ukrainian prison for going against one of the commanders. But yeah, long story short, Kilo ended up being one of the guys who didn't go out with the walking wounded in the first wave of guys who went in, and he ended up dying as a result of being a part of the assault into this tree line. The other foreigner who went is a guy named Israel. Somehow everybody thought he was me, so I got reported dead. And then apparently Israel was still alive too, so he'd been knocked out and thrown out of his trench. He said, like, he remembered a couple people coming to, like, check on him, but he just kept going, like, in and out of consciousness. So He just woke up one day and just walked back to like the last OB. Yeah, sorry, that was a very long way of basically saying like I think Ukraine could have the sustainability if the commanders listened to the people who were advising them on how to fight. We understand that this is a different type of war that has ever been fought. Like even in Iraq and Afghanistan, it wasn't until the end where like you really had to worry about drones, and they were never being deployed in the capability they are now, where like a single drone could take out an entire Humvee full of personnel before that Humvee even gets to the point where you could get to a fight. Like we plan for 20% casualties before we even get to the point where we're actually fighting, like in like small armed firefights. So you have to be prepared for loss out here. But if we change the way that they were fighting, we wouldn't have to be as worried about loss. But that's the thing about not having a uniform military. You can't just pull all of the generals into a meeting and say, hey, like, you guys need to stop sacrificing your guys. We don't have the personnel or the capability to keep sacrificing people. And the other thing is out here, it's not a what you know, it's a what unit are you a part of. I know guys who are explosives experts who literally who were like not experts per se, but they were doing explosives for construction companies in Ukraine, and they're just a regular old soldier. Like they don't have an MOS specialty. Your MOS specialty out here is you sit in trench, or you're good enough to not sit in trench, and you go like walk around the battlefield and figure out what's going on. And so they've got this mentality that they have to fight like the Soviets, and that's why they're going to lose. No one's ever been able to fight Soviet tactics against Soviets and win. It's the units that are doing things like hit and run missions, units that are thunder running, or that are going in and saying like, hey, we know the Russians have this building. Let's stop firing all of our AT-4s at this building to try and possibly take them out and just burn the building down. Like I get it. Like some of the Geneva Convention will apply to like certain tactics in the way to fight, but that's things that you can worry about after the war. That's not something like there's no correct way to win a war against somebody who's not fighting a war in a way that's like I don't even know how I was going to put that, but I was like Russia's not fighting this war the way that like a war should be fought by order of the Geneva Conventions. Or Geneva Suggestions, as we call them in America.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that was the main reason that I wanted to talk to you, is because I want people to understand like this guy Kilo was good. He was a smart dude, but he had too much faith in the sustainability of fighting out here and joining assaults with like half-baked plans. And that's where they're losing most of their guys, is sitting in trenches and assaulting. And there's ways that we can go about doing this that aren't textbook like ways of doing it. Like that, you're not going to win this war fighting out of a textbook. You're not going to win this war sitting in a back room and having plans. You need this small unit leadership. And that's something that is ingrained in us from day one in the Marine Corps. It's like, what do you want to get done? If you want the Russians that are in that tree line dead, you can plan to send 60 people there to try and take out 50 plus people, or you can burn the tree line down and shoot everybody who runs out of the tree line because you know none of your guys are in there. And they also, about them being resupplied, their intel was so bad. These guys had like brand new crates of like unopened AKs that were in their trench. Like their trench was a 5-star hotel compared to like what the Ukrainians had on the other side. Like there was enough room where people could walk in and walk down like the line. And they had a concrete like dam that was built on the side of it. There was one on our side that was like a sewer system, and one on their side that was a sewer system, or like a waterway system.
Wow.
and they had used the side of the concrete as like kind of like a natural like wall for when they were building their trench like system. So it was completely covered over the top. We wouldn't have seen it from a drone.
Man, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're mentioning there about, Geneva Conventions and, it ties into war crimes and how things are done. How much, as like an American, I shouldn't say as an American, because America breaks that more than anyone else. But how much do you see that? I guess you just think like, oh, that's not the right thing. Like with treatment of POWs from the Ukrainian side or what the Russians are doing. How much of that do you see that is not kosher?
Let me figure out how to answer this in a way that doesn't have me in a congressional tribunal in 10 years. There's some commanders out here who treat like the Geneva Convention as a Geneva checklist, and then there's some commanders who are like by the book and will do everything the right way. It's something that has been a worry of mine since the beginning of this war. There's no central structure in the military, and I don't think there's going to be, because they don't have the universal military training where they can have a central structure like we do in the U.S. It is very dependent on what your commander will do to you if you do something that you're not supposed to. There's units out here that'll torture people. There's units out here that will literally maim like people intentionally and leave them to die, or maim or kill people that they can't take back. They'll say like, "Oh, we don't have enough room to take all of these guys back," and shoot the ones that they don't think are valuable or have valuable intelligence.
Right.
So it's like I said, very dependent on who you're around. Like it's a bunch of militias all wearing the same uniform, but they all operate in their own capacity and do what they think is best for their guys.
And does that include their own people? Like if you refuse to go on a mission or you go against something, that you could end up getting capped?
I've never seen someone I've never seen someone be punished for not accepting a mission. The guys that we came into that unit with were very like they were there because they wanted to be there. I will say I've seen, the level of punishment here, and it is very dependent on who's around and what whoever's in charge thinks that they can get away with, depending on whether it's our guys or their guys. For example, I can't tell you where this happened, but this was something I witnessed myself. One of the soldiers in the unit decided that he was going to go out past what curfew was to smoke a cigarette outside. And this was so we weren't very far from where there was active fighting happening. Maybe a 15-minute ride from like the actual the last trench line before it became Russian territory, which our trench lines weren't even truly trench lines. But he decided he was going to smoke a cigarette, and there were drones flying over. The drones flew over every night. It wasn't something that was uncommon, but people going outside to smoke past that time was uncommon. The commander yoked the dude up, beat the shit out of him a little bit, and brought him upstairs to a floor he thought that there was nobody living on, and shot like 4 or 5 times like down the hallway, like we could hear them yelling, like we didn't think like too much of it, but once we started hearing gunfire, like we were like, oh shit, like it might be Russians in this fucking building. Like everybody started like throwing off their body armor. Like at that point, a missile probably wouldn't have even cut the tension in the building. Like we were just prepared. So we start arming up. Our door is locked on the inside. So like we're like, oh, should we open the door? Should we not open the door? Like if we don't open the door and leave, like this will become a kill zone if somebody comes in here. So we open the door and like we're prepared to like to push out and like address whatever threat is going on in this hallway. And it turns out like it's just the commander, like just the guy super drunk and just yelling at one of his guys for smoking a cigarette. When I tell you, like the guy turned and looked at us, and if it hadn't been for the fact like I knew who this guy was, we probably would have fucking smoked him. Like it just like the grace of God, he just happened to like turn and then just be like, oh, like we didn't realize there was anybody on this floor. And he didn't even tell us that himself. Like he just walked off the deck. Like we were just all sitting there with this guy laying on the ground like a bloody heap. And then our translator slash like boss came up and was like, oh yeah, it's just a misunderstanding. Like the guy was smoking a cigarette while he was outside. It happens, you know, like PTSD and stuff.
Yeah, wow. Where did the commander shoot? When you say you heard gunshots, did you just shoot near him or something?
So he shot near him a couple of times and then fired into the stairwell. So that's why we were wondering if it was like people coming up the stairs and like they were someone at the top of the stairs like firing back, or whether it was just like somebody just lost their shit and was just shooting in the hallway. But there was a couple of impacts on the wall that was like right next to our room, and then a couple of impacts in the hallway.
It's just crazy, man.
Yeah. And never in my life did I think I was going to see something like that. Like, it's just not normal. Like in the U.S. military, like someone would have ended up in the brig, but they were just like, "These didn't happen, Tuck." And we're like, "Sure, bro, sure."
Yeah. And surely the treatment of like you said, like Russian POWs, if there's not enough value they see in them, they just kill them.
Yeah. And that's kind of like where we were. Like these guys are willing to do this to their own guys. Like imagine what they're doing to the Russians that we haven't seen yet. I mean, it didn't really bother us too much. Like it was kind of one of those like we'll just do our jobs. It's not until you really like sit back and like think about it and go like that's not normal.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of fucked. Like that's some shit that really would have somebody sitting in jail. But the commander was a good enough. He had good enough connections that they really couldn't do anything to him anyway.
Typical, yeah.
And the guy who he beat the shit out of just went to the hospital next day, got his cuts and everything like treated, and basically got thrown on the front line again.
Has there ever been a period where you've thought, I'm on the wrong side of this? Like you know, you've talked that, you know, you're like, well, I'm seeing the torches go down and people like this thing's happening, that there's swastikas and Nazis, and has there ever been like a crossing in your mind of like, maybe I'm on the wrong side, or have you been pretty firm and true to the defense of Ukraine?
Never have I thought like, oh, like I'm on the wrong side of the war. I've had people ask me like why I choose to fight for Ukraine instead of choosing to fight for Russia. Like what gives me a connection to Ukraine? I'm not Ukrainian. I'm not from Ukraine. I have a couple of Ukrainian friends, but not enough to be like, oh, or like they're not what I don't know them so well that I consider them family. Except aside from people I've actually met in Ukraine. The most simple way to put it is just Ukraine didn't invade Russia. Russia invaded Ukraine. And regardless of how I see the Ukrainians treating the Russian captured or POWs, I'm not saying that I've seen much. Like I said, I'm not trying to end up in in a tribunal. But the Russians are doing way worse to their people, and it's very well documented, the mass graves and just randomly killing civil like people in a town. They'll take over an area and just it'll be a lottery. It'll be like, oh well, I don't like the way this person looked at me today. Boom, like so. It's for the defense of the people in Ukraine. Like I'm willing to help them up until the point where they reach the Russian border, and at that point, I'm going to be like, hey, listen, like this, it's not my fight to take to Moscow. So you guys figure out what you guys want to do, and like I've helped you all I can.
Yeah.
I even said in the beginning when I was training the right sector, when they were asking like, would I go with them to go fight? I was like, yeah, up until the point where you guys go to retake Crimea. And they were like, why Crimea? And they were like, Crimea is Ukraine. And I was like, yeah, not according to Russia and not according to the world governments right now. So I was like, so it's a whole lot different helping Ukraine stop an invasion into Ukraine. It's a whole different thing to go and take back land that was taken from them in 2014.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. The Crimea, I think that is going to be, I think that's the big like fulcrum of this war of where support will maybe wane. I'm not too sure yet.
We don't get to choose whether the guys who are out here helping them, whether it's International Legion or the guys who are able to get actual Ukrainian military contracts, we don't get to choose whether we get branded as mercenaries after this or not. Like, but we do get to choose at what point we say, okay, like this is the point where like even if you're the best fighter in the world, like your reputation is not going to recover. This is the point where there's no way I could justify a security clearance background check if I were to ever possibly get back into doing like getting into doing contracting work in the future.
Yeah, no, for sure. I had another question on the right sector. I know some guys both on and offline who have had experience, similar yourself there. And it seemed like there's a theme of like there's a lot to do with the CIA there. Have you seen any of that? And I even know some guys who were like, I don't actually think they were in the CIA, but they were just handing out like the CIA coins and shit. But they don't actually think that they were spooks. Have you seen any of that?
I've run into a couple of Ukrainian spooks. They're very easy to like figure out which ones are spooks. As for American guys, there's this trio that I met very early in the war. So most of the guys who were coming here to fight as foreigners, they're in the beginning. You had a lot of like big name groups coming in. There were guys who were former Navy SEALs, guys who were former Force Recon, MARSOC. Those guys either like rest their souls died very early in the war or figured that it wasn't sustainable to fight the way the Ukrainians were fighting and left. Some of them are still like kicking around like in other groups and stuff, and I absolutely love them because the training that they have and the knowledge they have is still very valuable here. There's even a group of them that got together and made an instruction group. It's very easy to tell those guys from guys who came here with a lot of money, a lot of benefactors, and have things that are not easily obtainable in this country. So part of the group of training the right sector, evaluating the right sector is more of what I'll call it. They had basic knowledge on that. They were sharing basic knowledge on things like EMS, tactics, like things that would definitely help and could get them into the roles of being instructors. But one guy was like kind of a tall, nerdy dude with glasses, said that he was non-military, that he had just been he worked for a training company. Other dudes it looked exactly what you would expect, like the poster child of the French Foreign Legion to look like, and was like, yeah, I'm French Foreign Legion. And then the last guy that was with them was he said he was airborne or he was a ranger, and he I forget what his background was, but it wasn't anything special. He said he'd been contracting for like the last 15 years and was just familiar with Ukraine and familiar with fighting from the U.S. military. So he was like, yeah, so we just came out here to train. These dudes had their own M4s, had their own like sidearms, had a Dodge Ram 1500 that was a 2022 Dodge Ram 1500 that was kitted out. So I'm like, there's no way that you guys just showed up and like got handed all of these things. Like, that's not 100,000 Rivna vehicle right there. That's like a million Rivna vehicle that you're driving. You can't even like at the time like they were handing M4s out like candies to their own guys, but it was hard to get an M4 and ACOG in the very beginning of this war. And for sidearms, like you're just not carrying a sidearm in Ukraine unless you're somebody who's important or you've got a black market guy on the side who can get you one. Even now, one of the biggest issues I have in Ukraine is that I build guns at home. I can't buy an AR off the shelf here. Like I can't even build an AR out here. So I'm getting like they have us using C Brens, which everybody thinks is the best weapon in the world, and that thing won't feed 3 magazines reliably once it gets dirt in the actual chamber.
Right. Yep.
And so like if I could build my own AR out here and convince the Ukrainian government to like, hey, like foreigners who hold military contracts should be able to go into a store and buy a firearm. Like you guys are going to have us do a psych eval and or get citizenship. And I was like, it's not going to change the fact that like we still have to fight. Like I don't have time to be arguing with someone about whether I'm crazy or not. Like I became a Marine. Of course I'm fucking nuts. But yeah, there's definitely been some guys out here who their resumes were either they weren't telling the whole story or they were vastly underselling intentionally. Like these guys just gave off the fact that they were working for somebody else, and the fact that like they all looked like the cookie cutter like version of whatever they said they were. It's like someone can go into a book and be like, oh, this is how a Marine looks, dresses, and this is what a Marine wears, and study that and pass in a group of Marines like fairly easily. These guys looked like that's what they did. They researched exactly what they needed to know to be able to convince other people that they were just as good as they said they were and not anything better.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. It's like that. There's a meme about like undercover cops at like a festival trying to get drugs, and it's like, "Hello, fellow teenagers," just like pants pulled down low and a fucking tie-dye shirt on, and you're like, "Fucking yeah, obvious." I get that, but it seems that a lot of the guys I know who've had dealings around the right sector is where they tend to run into these guys.
Yep.
Yeah, weird.
And I have a feeling it's because of it. It's those groups like they're checking to see like what these groups are being given, if these groups are going to possibly be a threat in the future, things like that.
Yeah, right. And where are you serving now? If you can say like who with?
So right now we're with the Belarusian Volunteer Battalion. It's a lot of the stuff out here, not really frontline work, but in the rear has come to like a grinding halt because of the investigations that are going on with the gore. I was talking about running into what's it called? The high level Fed boys, or we ran into actual FBI guys in Kyiv when I came back to join this group. I was just like, what you guys doing here? And they're like, not investigating you guys. And we're like, okay, have a nice day.
Yeah, so like actual FBI guys in Kyiv.
Yeah, I was like, God damn, like they were like, oh, so you guys foreign volunteers too, like humanitarian aid? And they're like, no, but what kind of humanitarian aid are you doing? I was like, anti-humanitarian kind? And they were like, no, we're with the FBI. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, there's definitely gonna be some financial crimes that I guess they're investigating out here or something, or assisting in investigating.
Yeah, there's a fucking lot of that,
And kind
man.
of, yeah, kind of played right into like the Gore coming to a screaming halt like a week later. Was apparently they fired all of their recruiters, and now they got any recruiters.
Yeah. Fucking wild, man.
Yeah.
And how much like corruption have you come across like that, of things going missing, money going missing, weapons?
So the lovely commander that I told you about, the one who was shooting at one of his own subordinates, that's probably the most corrupt person I've ever run into, like just morally, like financially. I mean, this dude would walk in with like brand new 338 Lapuas and like set them in like his locker room, and then like walk in with a hooker like 30 minutes later. He'd be like, no, she just does a massage. Like, bruh, we can hear those sounds. Them ain't no massage sounds. But yeah, no, that we've had people walk, like we had the reason we started locking our door from the inside, like while we were sleeping, and we had a lock on the outside from when we were leaving, is because our commander would literally not the same guy, but a different guy would walk into our room, just pick up like whatever he thought was valuable and just go sell it or go trade it for something else. Like we've had weapons that we put our like it was a like given weapon from the unit, so like an AK or something, and we kitted them out to make it like our piece that we would carry out. And next day we come into the room and it's missing. And when you can ask all you want, but unless you have somebody sitting there like watching your gear, or unless you have a lock on the room, your stuff could get taken. Corruption is just a thing in Ukraine in general. By the way, it's not specific to any section or any person. If you want to get something, there's the direct way to go about it, and then there's the indirect way to go about it. And 90% of the time, the direct way is so backed up by people trying to do it the direct way that people will tell you like, give me 5,000 roofing. You give them 5,000 roofing, and they just give you whatever you need.
Sorry, what I was going to ask was, how have you found that this counteroffensive is going? Like, what's the feeling about it, and where do you think that that'll end up?
So I have not participated in the counteroffensive. I don't know if I mentioned I went home for about 6 months and then came back to join the unit that I'm with now.
Yep.
I will say, if they're still using the same tactics they were before, I can see why their counteroffensive isn't going as well as it could be, but in a way that's also kind of helping Ukraine, because now we see that especially in Chernobyl, and they have a training group run by it's not run by him, but a pretty famous YouTuber is out there with them, Sivdiv.
Yep.
And they're now sending their guys to go get actual training. Their medics aren't just I sat through a 2-hour class and now I'm a medic. They're their assault teams, their drone teams. They're learning to coordinate with each other to actually make the individual skills they have uniform. And that's what they need more than being able to just punch through Russian lines immediately, because there's no point in them punching through these lines if they can't hold them. And having a skill set that makes you dangerous to get involved with will help you hold those lines.
Yeah. No, it makes no. I actually know Sivdiv personally, and the TDI team doing that training as well.
Yeah.
Mate, look, is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about or mention? Anything off the top of your head?
I just think that it would be really awesome if we could get people who fought out here together as a large group and address some of the issues that we've come into contact with out here. One of the biggest issues that we are having out here, like currently for every single foreigner I've talked to, is finding reliable vehicles to use not just on the front line, but even in the rear for logistics. The finding reliable or getting leveraging the Ukrainian government to allow foreigners who are fighting here to be able to do things like purchase their own weapons. I mean, $3,000 is nothing for us to spend in the States. $3,000 here gets you a decent weapon. And us relying on unit weapons, like for people who know what they're doing, it's like we're on the back end of like what's good in the units. And I would tell them, like, prioritize your guys. Like, some of us don't mind spending our own money to have like a little bit nicer of a thing than what everybody else is carrying. But if we're not given the opportunity to kit out our own weapons or to buy our own weapons to kit out, then we're not an asset to you. Like, anybody can run a stock AK. It doesn't mean you can run a stock AK well. But if I'm shooting, even if it's an AR-15 or like without full auto, most of us don't use full auto, that unless we absolutely have to, and that's what our machine gunners are for. But yeah, like an AR-15 would be invaluable to like 90% of us who are fighting, and it's because it's a weapon system and platform we know, but we can't get them, and there's no one up the government's ass right now, essentially telling like the Ukrainian government, hey, you've got people here who are good. They just need these things and they're willing to buy them themselves. You just have to make the process for them to get them easier, as well as getting the pay sorted out, because that's something that I guess everybody's running into. This isn't my primary source of income, so it hasn't really affected me as much, but I do know a lot of people who were really good at what they did who ended up having to leave because they were just going in debt, like trying to help Ukraine. And it's like you'd promise, they get like promise pay and not get it, or if they made too much of a big deal about pay, they would end up like not doing the missions that they had set out to originally and end up someplace whacking mines or just doing the most dangerous missions that are in the area, because that's what they would be assigned to after they brought up that they weren't going to work unless they were actually getting paid.
Yeah, that seems like everyone I speak to is like no one's getting paid or no one's getting paid fucking correctly.
And we don't, like, I don't want it to sound like them losing Western assistance if they don't get these things sorted out, but it would definitely help with a lot of Western assistance if they did. If they made it easy, like, to get vehicles from the States into Ukraine, or even like, because European vehicles aren't really the greatest for the roads that Europe has, which is crazy. Like, you would think that you live in Europe, you want to have pickup trucks, right? Because like you've got a lot of like valleys and hills, you've got a lot of like farmland, but no, these people just don't believe in like a Dodge Ram. Like,
yeah,
and the ones that are here aren't like a second gen Dodge Ram that I can just like drive through the woods and not have to worry about. It's like a newer Dodge Ram where like you tap a tree the wrong way and you've got to spend like 5 years knocking out the body work to to get it back to being functioning. So if any American company like who's either into restoring like old pickup trucks or old cars, anything that they could send over or get sent over as an NGO to Ukraine, it would vastly help. Europe is drying up when it comes to usable vehicles and sustainable vehicles, and that's something that we have an abundance of in the United States. There's more vehicles that we have sitting in in junkyards that would be assets to this war that like Europe will never be able to get in a million years. Yeah. Because they just don't believe in the same things we believe in when it comes to these vehicles.
Yeah, same as the Aussies, mate. Australians just fucking every second person's got a Land Cruiser. That's what you need there.
Yeah.
Mate. Well, look, mate, I really do appreciate your time and your honesty with everything.
Like I said, I just appreciate you giving me the soapbox to stand on. Like I said, I've watched you for pretty much since the beginning of you doing podcasts when you got back to the States, or when you got to the States, and it's just Like it was crazy. Just to see somebody else who went through some of the things that I went through, and like knowing that like you're not the only person who sees the problems or the issues, or believes in the tactics you believe in. It makes a big difference.
Oh, for sure, man, for sure. Well, dude, thank you for everything. Fucking look after yourself, and definitely, man, we'll keep in touch both on and offline. And you're always, your boys, you're always welcome to come on and chat to me, and soapbox, whatever. You're always welcome.
Thank you, brother. I'm gonna send you some pictures of Kilo that if you could just pin up and let people know like this guy was good at what he did. Didn't always make the best decisions, but you'll never find somebody else in this world, or I don't know if I'll ever find somebody else in the world who had like as big of a set of brass balls as this kid had.
Yeah, mate. Look, and yeah, absolutely anything you want of him, just let us know, bro.
Appreciate it.
Easy, dude. Well, I appreciate your time. I'll speak to you soon, brother.
All right, be easy, stay blessed, man.
Okay, see you, bro.